All right, this hearing of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, the Subcommittee on East Asia Pacific and the International Cybersecurity Policy will come to order. Before I begin, I want to go over a few ground rules. There will be zero tolerance for protests or any efforts to communicate with witnesses or any of the senators here. If you choose to do so to disrupt this hearing, you will be arrested immediately and barred from the committee for 1 year. We invite the public to attend, but we also have important business to attend to. With that said, we welcome everyone here today and thank our witnesses for agreeing to testify. We will begin with opening statements from myself, followed by the ranking member, Senator Coons, and then we will hear from our witnesses. Following the testimonies, we will move to 5-minute rounds of questions. And with that, I will go ahead and begin. Almost 70 years ago, Sputnik launched the greatest technological competition in U.S. history. The space race with the Soviet Union transformed global science and reshaped the Cold War. Today, we face a similar contest, this time with Communist China, and even higher stakes. Artificial intelligence will revolutionize daily life, and its military uses will shape the global balance of power. Beijing is racing to fuse civilian AI with its military to seize the next revolution in military affairs. However, unlike the moon landing, the finish line in the AI race is far less clear. For the U.S., it may be achieving artificial general intelligence, human level, or greater machine cognition. Communist China, by contrast, is focused on rapidly diffusing AI across industry, manufacturing, robotics, and smart cities. These diverging visions were made clear this summer when both the U.S. and Communist China released new AI strategies. The Trump administration's AI action plan centers on openness, markets, and liberal norms, cutting red tape, building data centers, and other AI infrastructure, exporting our full AI technology stack, including hardware, models, software, applications, and standards to allies and partners, countering Beijing in international fora, and enforcing export controls. Beijing's AI Plus strategy champions state control, sovereignty, and sustained high-level diplomacy to shape the global environment. What's at stake is simple: a U.S.-led future that benefits the free world, or a China-led AI order that reshapes the global system in line with their authoritarian values. The risk could not be higher. This race will be won by who attracts the best talent, wields the best chips, and trains the best algorithms. America's early lead rests in large part on our dominance of global compute power. At the core of compute are advanced AI chips, the best of which are made by American companies. Denying Beijing access to these chips is therefore essential. President Trump had the foresight in his first administration to restrict specialized semiconductor manufacturing equipment from being sold to Communist China. Without cutting-edge tools, Chinese fabs produce AI chips that are inferior to ours. Today, our top chips are roughly 5 times more powerful than theirs, and we manufacture them at 10 times the annual scale. Further controls by the Trump and Biden administrations on advanced AI chips have forced Chinese AI companies to smuggle U.S. chips to keep up. If we sustain these limits while U.S. firms innovate and diffuse our technology globally, our compute lead will widen exponentially. That's why Senator Coons and I plan to introduce the Safe Chips Act. This legislation would put in statute the Trump administration's current red lines on what AI chips are allowed to be sold to Communist China for 30 months to preserve our edge. Xi Jinping has made clear he has no intention of remaining reliant on American technology. The CCP's recent fourth plenum doubled down on the goal of technological self-reliance. The U.S. and our allies, including the Netherlands, Taiwan, Japan, and South Korea, control nearly every critical mode of the supply chain, which is the most complex in human history. This is a structural advantage that Beijing cannot easily overcome. Together, we must collectively enforce semiconductor export controls and close loopholes so Xi's strategy fails. To win the AI race, we must also confront our vulnerabilities. Compute alone is not enough, and Communist China has advantages elsewhere. AI data centers require massive energy. Communist China generates twice the electricity we do and is rapidly expanding capacity while our grid ages. China leads in domestic AI adoption and is exporting its tech globally while U.S. adoption lags. It produces 27 million more STEM graduates per decade than the U.S., even as we face an AI talent shortage. Communist China now leads in open AI models, accelerating diffusion of its technology, standards, and influence. It also dominates critical minerals and rare earth elements, which are the lifeblood of AI tech and hardware. Communist China completely controls the sector with near monopolies in magnets, cobalt, and lithium. Communist China's recent restrictions on global exports show how it can use that leverage to dominate the world and what leverage that creates for it. President Trump's recent critical minerals deal with Australia and other allies are a good first step, but far more is needed. Some argue these advantages mean that Communist China will inevitably win the AI race. They said the same thing during the space race. They misunderstand Americans' resolve and ingenuity. They were wrong then, and they were wrong again this time. But success will require the right policies and sustained investment. I look forward to hearing from our excellent panel of witnesses on how to ensure the United States, not Communist China, shapes the AI ecosystem of the 21st century. I would like now to recognize my distinct colleague and ranking member for this committee, Senator Coons.
Thank you, Chairman Ricketts, and thank you for working so closely together on this critical hearing. I am greatly enjoying our service together on this subcommittee. I'd like to thank our panel of four senior, seasoned, and experienced witnesses to help us discuss today how the United States can win the race to ensure global leadership, even global dominance in AI. AI, as you've said, Chairman, is the defining technology of the 21st century, out of which so many other significant advances will come, as with the printing press or the steam engine or the electricity developments of previous centuries. AI is the transformation technology that will change our world. Poised to unlock countless opportunities in nearly every sector of the global economy, from healthcare to education, from manufacturing to energy. It also brings risks. It will be dramatically transformational to military and arms, to intelligence, to cybersecurity, and so much else. Our dominance in AI isn't just essential for our economic and industrial success, but is critical to our national security. So we need to work together to ensure that as the world builds out its AI infrastructure, it's built on an American tech stack. Our chips, our cloud infrastructure, and our models. And as a consequence, on a foundation of American values that help ensure free economies and free societies. We're not alone in this race, as the chairman just said. China's been working overtime to catch up with us for more than a decade, using state-backed policies to invest massively in accelerating AI adoption. They have poured money into research, development, deployment. Xi set a goal of being able to be the world's leading AI power by 2030. And thankfully, as we'll hear from this panel of talented witnesses, this effort hasn't been wholly successful. The PRC does have a commanding advantage in energy production, in talent, but is struggling to produce advanced AI chips. Secretary Letnick testified this spring that China can currently only produce 200,000 advanced AI chips per year, while we know American and allied companies produce more than 10 million. This is our sole competitive, critical advantage in AI, and we cannot squander it. So today I look forward to discussing how we should define the U.S. approach to this watershed technology. Here's a few foundational principles I'd like to suggest that I believe my Republican colleagues will agree with. Maintaining AI primacy has to be a central national imperative, central to our economic security and geostrategic goals. The world's most powerful supercomputers and next-generation AI must be built by U.S. companies in the United States on a foundation of our democratic principles, which requires us to continue to invest in chips, in energy infrastructure, and in ensuring we are attracting and retaining the world's top talent. We have to export the full AI stack to our allies and partners so that American AI becomes the foundation for the world in this century. And at the same time, we have to deny our adversaries the ability to build their own stacks. So I'm pleased to join with you, Chairman, in introducing the Safe Chips Act. We also need to recognize that China's inability to access computing power is its chief, if not sole, AI vulnerability. and we stand a much better chance of winning every part of the AI competition if we deny them access. So I look forward to hearing from our distinguished panel about how we can translate some of these principles into concrete U.S. government actions, and to hear your advice on what more we can and should do together. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Coons. And now we will turn to our witnesses. Our first witness today is Dr. Chris Miller. Dr. Miller is a professor at the Fletcher School at Tufts University and is a non-resident senior fellow at AEI. Dr. Miller's latest book, Chip War, The Fight for the World's Most Critical Technology, reveals the geopolitical impact of the computer chip. He also advises businesses and asset managers at Greenmantle, serves as a member of the Geopolitics Advisory Council at McKinsey & Company, and advises semiconductors and other technological startups and investors. Dr. Miller, the floor is yours. Please keep your remarks to 5 minutes.
Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to address this panel today on the topic of AI, which I agree will be the most transformative technological and economic force we see across our economy and society over the coming decades. Right now, just 3 years into the boom in investment in artificial intelligence that was set off by ChatGPT, we're only in the early innings of what I expect to be decades of impact on AI, both in terms of its economic ramifications, increasing productivity, its ability to spur the next generation of technological tools, but also its application to military and intelligence use cases. And indeed, right now, we're already seeing the early stages of the application of AI to defense and intelligence use cases, which is why the work of this committee in assessing the importance of AI leadership and devising ways to continue American AI leadership is, I believe, so important. The use of artificial intelligence in defense and intelligence is a continuation of a long-running trend of applying the most advanced computing capabilities to military and intelligence applications. This is something that many of the world's major powers have been doing now for many decades, but the new capabilities that AI enables will only intensify their reliance on advanced computing. We see this, for example, in war zones today, in Russia and Ukraine. It's already the case that both sides are using artificial intelligence to sift through intelligence data and identify what is signal and what is noise. It's already the case that militaries and intelligence agencies are relying on AI to guide systems more semi-autonomously and increasingly with greater degrees of autonomy. That too requires advanced AI systems. And it's already the case that AI is being used for cyber offense and for cyber defense. And all these reasons suggest to me that it's critically important that America does lead in AI, as indeed the Trump administration has set out in its AI dominance strategy. And I would argue that there are three key inputs right now to American AI leadership. First, the production of electrical power, where we unfortunately lag behind our competitors and adversaries in China. Second, the production of computing power, where I believe we have a profound edge over China, an edge that has endured over many years and will endure for at least the foreseeable future. And third, brain power, where we have a historical advantage, though I worry our lead has been slipping over the last several years. So let me take each of those three inputs to AI leadership in turn. First, when it comes to electrical power, it's well known that China is leading the world in installation of new electrical power from every different source. The United States has a grid that is straining to add even small volumes that we're currently adding. AI will require vastly more electricity to power the data centers that we need, and it's critically important that we do everything we can to provide the power that AI data centers require. But I think it's unlikely we're going to keep up with China's additions of electrical power, which is why it's so important that we retain our leads in the two other spheres, computing power and brain power. When it comes to computing power, the United States, alongside partners in South Korea, in Taiwan, and the Netherlands, leads the world in the design and the manufacture of the chips that make AI possible. And the key trend in AI over the last, not just several years, but really the last several decades has been that if you want to build and deploy more advanced AI systems, you need larger volumes of increasingly advanced AI chips. This is why the most advanced AI tools today require vast data centers full of the most capable AI chips. And today, almost all of the world's AI models are trained and deployed on chips that are designed by American companies and produced either in the United States or, in most cases, in American allies. This is a lead that China has been trying to catch up to now for a very long time. It's already a decade ago, in 2014, that China first named semiconductors as a core technology that industrial policies like the Made in China 2025 plan tried to catch up in. And it's still the case, 10 years later, that China is still half a decade behind when it comes to the production of advanced semiconductors. And for the foreseeable future, all of the estimates we have, private sector, public sector, academia, there's no credible estimates that suggest China is going to catch up soon when it comes to the production of advanced semiconductors. So I think the computing lead that America has, along with its allies, is really quite strong. The final and critically important input to AI leadership is brainpower, because of course we need lots of smart engineers to build AI systems and many more to deploy them across all aspects of our economy. And China's educational system is impressive in the number of engineers it turns out. And we've seen over the last couple of years that Chinese engineers at companies like DeepSeek and Alibaba are very capable of devising AI models that are almost as good as those in the United States. I think it's fundamentally important that the United States also retain its advantages in talent, both in training our own and in attracting the world's best, to ensure that we're able to devise the next generation of AI systems here, capitalizing on our leadership in both brain power and computing power. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to speak here.
Great, thank you, Dr. Miller. Our second witness is Mr. Greg Allen. Mr. Allen is a senior advisor with Wadhwani AI Center at CSIS, where he leads a team of experts on AI policy, governance, diplomacy, geopolitics, and national security, and hosts the AI Policy podcast. He has helped shape U.S. and allied AI strategy at major global forums, including the G7 and the AI Safety Summit series, with a particular focus on AI export controls and the U.S.-China competition. Before joining CSIS, Mr. Allen served as a director of strategy and policy at the Department of Defense's Joint Artificial Intelligence Center. His earlier experience includes leading market analysis and competitive strategy for Blue Origin and serving as a corporate strategy consultant in semiconductors, high-performance computing, robotics, and space technologies. Mr. Allen, the floor is yours as well.
Distinguished members of the committee, thank you so much for the honor of being with you here today. I want to start first by talking about why it matters to U.S. national security to have an AI advantage. And I think the best way to do this is by an analogy. And that is the analogy of computers, because AI, like computers, are a general purpose technology. And so if you go back to 1945, there is one application of digital programmable computers on planet Earth, and it is code breaking, and it shortened World War II by 2 years. So it starts out with one killer app. But if you fast forward to today, everything that the military does to some greater or lesser extent depends upon computers. Airplanes have computers in them. Ships have computers in them. Missiles have computers in them. And even the stuff that does not have computers, like bullets or clothing, was designed on computers. And the logistics that got them to our warfighters was managed by computers. This is a general purpose technology that touches everything that we do and enhances everything that we do. And we're in a similar state now with AI, where there are a number of applications that are already incredibly proactive. Ones that I was involved with during my time at the Department of Defense was using artificial intelligence capabilities to analyze satellite imagery, to analyze drone imagery, because perhaps you don't know, but it turns out that we collect so much imagery that there's no way that we could have human analysts look at it all every single day. And so we use AI as a sort of recommendation engine that says, this picture is of empty ocean, this picture is of empty ocean, this picture has a warship in it. I recommend you look at this one first. And that kind of incredible productivity boost that we got all the way back in the late 2010s from AI told us that this was going to be the story of computing all over again, where it starts off with incredibly attractive and useful applications and slowly but surely filters into everything that we do. And for those who think that AI is fundamentally a commercial technology, I want to emphasize that the dual-use links of this technology are growing stronger every day. If you interact with a large language model like a chatbot, like ChatGPT or Anthropic's Claude or Google's Gemini, this seems like a harmless chat interface, but the capabilities underpinning that and the types of companies who are good at creating that are also very good at creating very powerful military and espionage relevant capabilities. Whether that is using your coding agents to help you create business software or using your coding agents to autonomously execute cyber attacks, the technology stack underpinning this is almost identical. And this extends even to autonomous vehicles. When I was in the Department of Defense, the technology stack underpinning large language models and the technology stack underpinning autonomous vehicles was largely distinct, aside from some hardware similarities. But increasingly, with the rise of vision language models, we've discovered that it actually helps for autonomous cars to be able to think in words about the data that their sensors are collecting. And so these commercial worlds of autonomous capabilities, large language models, all of that is going to have relevance to the next generation of autonomous aircraft, which the DoD is investing billions of dollars in, and so is, unfortunately, China. In 2018, I traveled to China 4 times and attended multiple military, diplomatic, and technology conferences. And at one of those conferences, I sat next to a man named Zheng Yi, who was one of the top executives at a company called Norinco, which is one of the largest defense conglomerates in China. And he said something that I'll never forget. Here's what he said. In future battlegrounds, there will be no people fighting. He went on to predict that lethal autonomous weapons powered by AI would be commonplace, and that his company believes that ever-increasing military use of AI is, quote, inevitable. We are sure about the direction and that this is the future. And he said that this is a future that his company was already working to build. So the idea that the United States can lose its advantage in AI and maintain its advantage in military power is simply nonsensical. And if we go back to these chip export controls, I believe this is the single most important thing that the United States did in US-China competition over the past years. And it has roots in both the first Trump administration with limiting the exports of advanced semiconductor manufacturing equipment, and it has roots in the Biden administration cutting off access to advanced AI chips. The most advanced data centers for building AI have hundreds of thousands and soon millions of these chips costing tens or hundreds of billions of dollars. This is why America has an edge in AI, and I feel very confident in saying that in another parallel universe where we had not had these chip export controls, the largest data centers today would already be in China. The best models today would already be coming out of China. That's a future that we stopped, and it's one that we continue to have the ability to stop if we continue this policy and close the necessary loopholes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. Our third witness is Mr. Tarun Chhabra. Mr. Chhabra is a distinguished visiting fellow at the Hoover Institution and head of national security policy at Anthropic. Previously, Mr. Chhabra has served as a deputy assistant to the president and coordinator for technology and national security on the National Security Council from 2021 to 2025. Mr. Chhabra led the development of the U.S. policy on export controls, industrial strategies, inbound and outbound investment controls, data security, and ICT and services restrictions. He previously served as a director of strategic planning at the NSC, speechwriter to the Secretary of Defense, and senior fellow at Georgetown Center for Security and Emerging Technology. Mr. Chhabra, the floor is yours.
Chair Ricketts, Ranking Member Coons, and members of the committee, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today, especially with this distinguished panel. Leadership in artificial intelligence will profoundly shape our economic prosperity and national security, and the United States must seek and to extend our current leadership in AI, especially with regard to the Chinese Communist Party. And the most important point that I would like to make today is that we expect powerful AI systems to come online in the next 2 or 3 years, systems that could be transformative from everything to entrepreneurship, to military decision-making, to scientific discovery. These same next few years will also play out a global contest to diffuse American AI versus China's AI around the world. And in this very same window of time, China will be unable to produce competitive AI chips at scale unless we squander our advantage. So this critical window for both frontier AI development and for global AI diffusion, in this window, let's not help the Chinese Communist Party catch up on the AI frontier, nor should we help CCP-controlled companies fill their data centers, either in China or around the world, with American chips. Indeed, access to advanced AI chips and the equipment needed to manufacture them is the single most significant factor that could allow the CCP to close the gap with the United States in the AI race. If we surrender this choke point, we risk losing our quest for dominance AI and, by extension, strategic national advantages in innovation, growth, and national security. The AI race with the CCP plays out across 3 dimensions. First, the United States must maintain dominance on the AI frontier by building the most powerful models. We maintain this dominance if we sustain advantages in computing power, while fully harnessing our strengths in talent and following the Trump administration's action plan on AI, in particularly with respect to energy. Second, the United States must also win the race for global diffusion of AI. We must ensure that the full American AI stack, not China's, powers global adoption. The American AI stack should be the full American AI stack, American models running on American chips in American data centers powering American AI platforms and applications. Third, for our prosperity and national security, we must bring AI more rapidly into the defense and intelligence communities and much faster than China does. But to ensure American AI dominance, we must fully implement the following critical policy recommendations. First, we should strengthen our export controls on advanced AI chips. The Trump administration has taken a positive step forward by taking Blackwell-class chips off the table for export to China. We should do the same for also powerful H200 classes of chips. Second, we should strengthen and also ensure our allies close loopholes in export controls on semiconductor manufacturing equipment. The Biden administration's efforts here with the Netherlands, Japan, Korea, and Taiwan were important but did not go far enough or fast enough. Third, we should act to restrict our adversaries, including and especially the CCP, from remote access to frontier models and the computing power needed to train those models. Anthropic not only prohibits direct access from restricted regions, including China, but also access by companies anywhere in the world that are majority owned by entities headquartered in China or other restricted regions. We hope that other companies will follow. Fourth, we should work with like-minded allies and partners to develop and promote voluntary standards for trusted AI deployment, akin to what the first Trump administration did with its Clean Network initiative focused on trusted telecommunications infrastructure. I believe the AI race is America's to lose. We stand ready to support strong bipartisan action to ensure American AI dominance. Thank you, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Chabra. Our final witness today is Dr. James Mulvaney. Dr. Mulvaney is the Chief Intelligence Officer of Premier, a strategic consultancy for companies investing in China. A Chinese linguist by training, James is a leading international expert on Chinese cyber, technology transfer, espionage, and military issues. In 2013, he co-authored Chinese Industrial Espionage, which is the first full account of the complete range of China's efforts to illicitly acquire foreign technology. Dr. Mulvaney, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairman Ricketts, Ranking Member Coons, other members of the committee. Because I am familiar with my friends and colleagues here and their expertise, I'm going to confine my remarks today specifically to the issue of questions about the Chinese military and its use of artificial intelligence and the implications it has for the discussions today. I have 3 quick points. The first is that the Chinese military, or PLA, to a greater degree than the United States, is building artificial intelligence at the core of its military developmental process. Within China, one of the most important concepts, informatization, 信息化, is this idea that information and communication technologies can allow China to leapfrog entire stages of development. The military is no different. And they are moving towards a concept, 智能化, or intelligization, which is very difficult to say in English, that is this idea that you layer in artificial intelligence and machine learning to then work at network speed. At the heart of the Chinese military, therefore, is a cybernetic model. In other words, a model that is built on the idea of man-machine interface, much less so than our sort of John Wayne-oriented personal decision-making, independent sort of glory kind of system. And at the heart of it is a command and control brain called the Integrated Command Platform that the Chinese military acknowledges is superior to human cognition. And this explains why the Chinese military is embracing AI, why they're embracing full autonomy, believing it's necessary to defeat what they call the strong or high-tech enemy, in other words, the United States. It also helps them overcome some of their human capital deficits from 8th grade conscripts, but it also, they believe, will allow them to make lethal decisions inside the decision-making loop of a high-tech enemy like the United States that is still insisting on human on the loop, human in the loop, because of our natural dystopian fears of some of these technologies. My second point, though, is that certain chip industry leaders are doubly wrong when they talk about the Chinese military. First, they say that the PLA does not need AI chips. I could not disagree more, given what I just said about how they're building this as the core of their military, and acknowledging that their own domestic chips do not meet their need. Therefore, there is a strong and consistent demand signal for the most advanced chips, which are coming from the United States. The Chinese military is also aggressively integrating large language models, both domestic and foreign, at every level of its system, all the way from national command decision-making all the way down to logistics. The second argument that leaders make is that the Chinese military can't rely on Western AI chips because of our technology controls. I would argue, however, that the loopholes and the lack of enforcement that were described by my colleagues have in fact given the Chinese military a great deal of confidence that through smuggling and a planetary scale level of technology espionage, that they have a sustained access to these chips at production level quantities. My third and final point, though, is that, like my colleagues, I believe we are at a strategic precipice. The previous controls, in my view, which I supported and helped enforce, were sound, but were fatally undermined by lack of enforcement or confusion on certain technical issues. But I think that the opponents of what we're talking about today fundamentally misunderstand the Chinese economy. We cannot addict China to the AI tech stack from the United States. People who say that have not been looking at the Chinese economy for very long, because I could point to a half dozen other industries that made exactly the same argument. We will addict China to our tech stack. We'll keep them downstream of us in the supply chain. And all of those industries have been shattered by Chinese competitors, particularly industries like solar, where they were pushed out of the China market and then crushed globally by underpriced overcapacity in various Chinese technologies. But there's another hard truth that these opponents don't understand. China has made it very clear from the national planning level on down, they do not see any future universe in which they are reliant on NVIDIA for AI chips or ASML for advanced lithography machines. The long-term goal is Huawei and other national champions on chips and SME on lithography machines. So anything that we're talking about with regard to US chips is a very short-term gap-filling measure. I support the Safe Chips Act that Senator Ricketts and Senator Coons are co-sponsoring, and our goal, simply stated, should be US tech stack dominance, if only because we want the emergence of AI and potentially AGI to occur in an environment that is consistent with our values and not the authoritarian values that are built in at fundamental levels in the implementation of AI in the Chinese system. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Dr. Mulvaney. And now we will move on to a round of 5-minute questions. I will start and then turn it over to the ranking member. Since the first Trump administration, the U.S. has imposed significant export controls on Communist China's semiconductor industry to maximize our leadership in computing capabilities that drive AI. However, there are some who assert that the export controls have led to unintended consequences hurting the U.S. more than our adversaries. Here are just a few of the most common arguments. First, restricting U.S. AI chips incentivizes the Communist Party to support Chinese firms like SMIC and Huawei to develop indigenous AI chips, chip alternatives. Dr. Mulvaney, you just kind of touched upon this. Instead of allowing advanced U.S. AI chips to be sold to China, this would hurt Chinese firms' ability to find a marketplace. Second, allowing chip sales would maintain Chinese dependency on the U.S. tech stack, keeping Chinese developers using our AI software and building AI infrastructure around our technology. Third, these controls are ultimately ineffective as restricted chips still find their way to Communist China through smuggling networks. And finally, they hurt U.S. jobs and reduce profits that could go to R&D to produce even more advanced chips. We just heard Dr. Mulvaney. Dr. Miller, could you assess the strengths and weaknesses of these arguments?
Well, Senator, I've studied the history of the Chinese chip industry over the last several decades, and I can say that indigenization of their own capabilities has been a goal for many years. It's not that China doesn't want its own technologies, it's that because of our controls, they can't produce them at the scale that's necessary. And I would therefore say it's wrong to argue that our controls have incentivized indigenization, because this is built into the way the Chinese leadership thinks about semiconductors. They're racing towards building out their own tech stack as fast as they can, but they can't do it fast enough to keep up with our technology leadership.
The White House recently released an AI action plan that doubled down on the need to strengthen export controls and to achieve this. It said denying our foreign adversaries access to advanced AI compute is a matter of both geostrategic competition and national security. These restrictions have helped prevent Beijing from indigenously producing and purchasing the advanced chips needed to train or deploy leading-edge AI systems. Instead, Chinese AI companies are forced to smuggle chips. As I mentioned in my opening statement, Senator Coons and I will be introducing the Secure and Feasible Exports of Chips Act, or Safe Chips Act. This bill would codify the Trump administration's current red lines on what AI chips are allowed to be sold to foreign adversaries. And I'm just going to ask all the witnesses, given we've got about 2.5 minutes here, if you could just run through, do you support this effort to restrict our adversaries' access to these most advanced chips? Dr. Miller, we'll start with you.
Senator, yes, I think codifying the export controls does make sense.
Great. Mr. Allen?
Absolutely, and I'll highlight that I think there's a specific benefit to doing so by codifying it in law, because I believe China's current position of not buying these chips is a negotiating gambit to try and get us to sell them better chips, and codifying it in law would make clear that that gambit is not going to work.
Yeah, and to be specific, you're talking about the H20 that
Yes.
we've offered to sell them, and they've said, no, we aren't going to allow our people to buy them. But you, again, what you're saying is that's just leverage into the negotiation.
Exactly.
Great, thank you. Mr. Chabra?
Yes, Senator, we fully support that, particularly codification.
Great, thanks.
As I said in my testimony, I of course support it, and specifically support the element of it that is not targeting individual Chinese companies, which I believe was a whack-a-mole strategy, but instead is setting technology thresholds on both equipment and the chips themselves, which I think is a far sounder way of having a more sustainable and resilient export policy.
Communist China and the People's Liberation Army are investing heavily in integrated AI into every aspect of the military. Dr. Mulvaney, and you just described that. Beijing has made it clear it views that the AI is simply a tool for, not just simply a tool for economic support, but as you mentioned, a decisive strategic weapon to offset the U.S. military advantage. And we're already seeing the results that you were describing there. The party also has this military-civil fusion strategy that ensures every AI breakthrough in Communist China's private sector can be rapidly funneled into PLA hands. Dr. Mulvaney, what are some of the potential military and cybersecurity risks if Communist China has access to greater computing power via advanced U.S. AI chips?
Well, I think we've already seen some real-world examples. Greg mentioned in his testimony that we've already seen this very devastating, completely AI-engineered cyber intrusion set. I believe that that's simply a harbinger of the future, making thousands of network decisions at network speed and not requiring human input as you have before. I think that an area where we're specifically looking at concern is things along the lines of what we know from the drone wars and what drone swarm warfare would look like, and the level of coordination necessary to be able to carry out those kind of activities, which is ideal for the kinds of systems that we're talking about today.
So are there specific steps that we should be taking to be able to counter this or prevent China from gaining this advantage?
Well, I think that recognizing that military-civil fusion means that you can't have a validated end user in China, that there is no such thing as a civilian validated end user that you can sell an AI chip that therefore prevents it from being accessible to the Chinese military as a matter of Chinese national policy called military-civil fusion.
Okay, thanks. Ranking member.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We all talk about the importance of winning the AI race, but I think I'd like to just put a finer point on the stakes here. Mr. Chhabra, your company Anthropic has recently put out a vivid case study of how China might well use AI models against us. Could you give us a little more detail about what it would look like to be in a world where China has won the AI race, how that affects their military and economic capabilities, and how they would use that against us, briefly?
Yes, Senator. In September of this year, Anthropic detected and disrupted an effort by Chinese state-affiliated actors to commit what we believe was the first documented case of an AI-orchestrated cyber espionage case in which 80 to 90% of the attack was conducted autonomously, including the intrusion, the efforts to exfiltrate data, so on and so forth. We believe there are about 30 targets that were impacted around the world. We, of course, we could disrupt it, inform the affected parties, engage the U.S. government, obviously, on it. And we're doing more to step up our own detection going forward. But unfortunately, I think we have to expect a lot more of this going forward, cyber attacks at scale. And so what it tells us is we need to invest a lot more in cyber defense. We need to make sure we have better models conducting defense, and we need to empower our government, particularly the military, with better models for cyber offense as well. We need to get the word out. It took us around 15 years to come to terms with how the internet was changing cybersecurity globally. We cannot afford that again. And it goes back to the question we were discussing earlier, which is we just need to have more powerful models, both for offense and defense, because we don't want to live in a world in which the CCP has better models to commit attacks like this.
Thank you, Mr. Chhabra. Mr. Miller, can you just describe the relative balance between the United States and the PRC when it comes to compute? Am I correct in understanding Secretary Lutnick's testimony earlier this year that China will produce roughly 200,000 of the most advanced AI chips, not even enough to feed their own data centers, let alone flood the global market?
Senator, that's correct. There's, of course, a range of estimates on China's current and future chip production, but by any realistic estimate, private sector, public sector, academic, China's going to produce ballpark 5% of the chip output of the West over the next couple of years. China is, of course, 20% of global GDP. It aspires to be a leader in AI, and so having such a small volume of chips is a real competitive disadvantage.
In fact, I think they aspire not just to be a leader, but to be dominant in AI, and as you've just pointed out. For our national security or economic security, that would be a very bad outcome. The Trump administration has reportedly considered selling advanced H200 chips to China, and we know Blackwells were discussed in the advance of the recent Xi-Trump meeting in South Korea. I just love a yes or no answer from each of you, if I could. Is it in the U.S. national interest to export either of these advanced NVIDIA chip models, H200s or Blackwells, to China?
No.
No.
No, Senator.
No.
So thank you for your support for a bill we look forward to introducing and advancing. I'd be interested in one last question, if I might, about export control loopholes. You've all talked about how important it is that we have effective export controls and that we close the relevant loopholes. There's two parts to this: ensuring Chinese companies and their subsidiaries both can't get access to advanced chips and semiconductor manufacturing tools. I've seen articles in the Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, about PRC subsidiaries in the U.S. being able to access chips and PRC companies leasing data centers abroad for training systems, both potential vulnerabilities. Mr. Miller, could you just talk to us for a minute, Mr. Allen as well, about what additional steps do we need to take to close these loopholes?
Senator, I believe the primary focus should be on first tightening up our existing export controls on the sale of chips to China. Once a chip crosses into China, we have no further control over it. I also believe there's further steps to be taken on the sale of chip-making equipment to China, where there are still real gaps in our export controls, especially when you compare our rules to those of the Netherlands and those of Japan. I further agree that we should look into restrictions or limitations on Chinese firms' ability to access data centers abroad.
Mr. Allen.
Let me just add on the equipment side of the story. The reason why Huawei does not currently have a chip that is competitive to NVIDIA is because of equipment and manufacturing export controls that the first Trump administration put in place. SMIC, the most advanced logic manufacturer in China, tried to buy an EUV machine in 2018, and was going to get the sale until it was blocked by export controls. Huawei was about to fab a 7-nanometer chip at TSMC before NVIDIA was. NVIDIA's current dominance in the Chinese market is the result of export controls, not something that is threatened by export controls. And the biggest challenge that we have to sustaining these export controls over the long term is on the equipment. Because China, I mean, actually the Huawei chips right now are pretty lousy, but they are capable of designing decent chips. What they cannot do is make decent chips. And that entirely hinges upon our ability to keep the equipment out there. So we have some good controls on equipment. We need to go after components, and we need to go after other allies and partners that make key components, like Germany, like others, to expand the multilateral nature of this.
Thank you. It seems clear we need a coordinated, sustained, strong partner strategy with our core allies. On previous trips we've taken to Taiwan, on visits I've recently made to the Netherlands, South Korea, I've raised these issues, and I think we need to make them a central part of our strategy. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Cornyn.
Thanks to the excellent panel. Each of you talked about the fact that China is racing to be able to indigenously produce the most advanced semiconductors, but they are behind. Mr. Miller, Dr. Miller, I know that you've written extensively on this topic, but what percentage of the advanced semiconductors are currently being manufactured in the United States?
Senator, we're just in the stages right now of ramping up production of advanced semiconductors in the United States. Until recently, the number was 0. Now I'm pleased to report it's slightly above 0, but we're still highly reliant on production in our allies like South Korea and like Taiwan.
Can we win the AI race if that status quo is maintained?
Senator, I believe diversifying our supply of advanced chips and producing more in the United States is critically important.
And this gets me to the problems we have of building things in America, and things like permitting problems, environmental reviews, challenges about our workforce. For example, I was in Abilene, Texas a few weeks ago, where 6,000 construction workers are building one of the largest data centers in the world, at least for now. Seems like a lot of competition, a lot of people trying to build data centers to even outstrip and larger than that. But Dr. Miller, you also mentioned the impact of brain power. It made me think about a book I read years ago by Richard Rhodes called The Making of the Atomic Bomb. The reason why the United States beat Germany in developing the atomic bomb is because of immigrants from Germany, Jewish immigrants who came to the United States fleeing anti-Semitism and the Nazi regime in Germany. Can you talk about the importance of legal immigration in terms of developing that brain power, supplementing what we're able to do here domestically?
Thank you, Senator, for that question. I believe America has a 250-year-long tradition of attracting the world's smartest minds and putting them to work in our country. The history of the chip industry has been built by attracting those smartest minds from the earliest chip companies up to the present. We find that the most capable entrepreneurs, the smartest engineers want to work in the United States, and continuing to make sure that that is true going forward, and that they do have pathways to found companies in the United States, to develop technology in the United States is of very high importance.
Mr. Chhabra, you, I believe, are prepared to speak about what the United States can do to expedite our ability to build manufacturing facilities here in the United States. I know, we're like Europe, who woke up one day after Putin invaded Ukraine and said, "Oh my gosh, we're almost entirely dependent on Russian energy." And of course, it takes a while to change that. Same thing, I think, applies here to advanced semiconductor manufacturing, where we were almost wholly dependent on Asia. But what can we do, or do you have any recommendations? I'd invite the whole panel to expedite the building of these manufacturing facilities, which allow us to compete and win the AI race here in America.
Thank you, Senator. Yes, we believe that the U.S. AI sector alone is going to require around 50 gigawatts of energy, of electricity capacity by 2028. I see Senator McCormick, who hosted an energy summit to talk about this subject. So we strongly support what the Trump administration has laid out in their AI action plan with respect to energy. That means addressing regulatory hurdles. It means supply chain constraints so we can build more of the supply chain here in America. There's a lot we can do, for example, on federal land. There's more we can do to ease some of the NEPA permitting requirements. Again, on federal land, we can clarify the scope of some of the agencies' NEPA reviews to make those go faster. We think we can build in America. Anthropic just announced a few weeks ago a $50 billion investment in Texas and New York initially. We'll be building more data centers, but we're going to need permitting reforms like this to make that happen.
And we all know the importance of energy as we've talked about, but also getting back to my point about permitting reform. One of our colleagues, Angus King, likes to point out that the same transmission lines that carry electricity generated from renewable sources are necessary to carry electricity from non-renewable sources. But obviously, we have a problem with that topic generally. I see my time's up, so I better leave it at that.
Senator Schatz.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks for a great panel. I want to start on the question of alignment. There's been a fair amount of conversation about sort of geopolitical, geostrategic alignment. I want to talk about alignment of values. And I guess I'll start with Mr. Miller. It occurs to me that the operating assumption is that American companies are going to represent American values. And that is not obvious to me in the AI space and in the chip manufacturing space. And I'm wondering whether you see alignment as already something that we've achieved, something we need to work towards. And if we need to work towards it, is UNESCO the right venue for effectuating that kind of alignment? Does it happen organically? I'm just wondering, the reason we're supposed to win this race is because of our values and our priorities. It's not obvious to me that the private sector actors here are yet aligned with our values and our priorities, and I'd like you to comment on that. I'll start with Mr. Miller.
Well, Senator, I would say that American companies have to be responsive to American regulations and American laws, whereas Chinese companies are responsive to Chinese regulations and Chinese laws. And so to me, the stakes of the race are which set of laws and regulations you'd like to have dictate your AI systems.
Mr. Allen.
I think Chris put it very well in talking about the laws and regulations. And to the extent that companies do or do not have values that we like, we should change their incentive structure to ensure that they do. One thing that I think is very frustrating in the conversation about China is that China is very happy to punish any American company for any negative thing they say about China. And so companies that have large businesses in China will never tell the truth to the American people about the reality of the Chinese Communist Party. And so there's an asymmetry in the discourse because of that immediate willingness to punish. And so I think what we need to do is, if you look at senior American AI executives who predict, for example, that China will win the AI race, what we need to make clear to these companies is that that would be terrible for your business, and that your job is to make as much profit as possible, and you will make the most profit possible by preventing China from winning the AI race and by following American laws and regulations in ways that are compliant with American values.
Mr. Chabra.
Senator, our view is that AI is too transformational a technology not to be governed by our democratic processes and values. We think it's absolutely essential that the federal government in particular take action to ensure that at a minimum AI labs are being as transparent as possible about their models, about how we are trying to align them to ensure that they're safe.
And who they work with.
And who they work with, and that we're promoting democratic values.
Doctor.
I agree 100%. As I said in my testimony, I would define American values across a couple of different features. One is intellectual property protection. and our strong legal system, which I think is absolutely critical. Secondly is lack of censorship. We know there's been a lot of very detailed research into the censorship that is built in to Chinese large language models, which in my view is not consistent with our values. And finally, I'd like to push back on a narrative I've been reading a lot recently about how we should emulate China in order to solve Senator Cornyn's problem, that China is somehow a more nimble regulator. It's easy to be a nimble regulator when the party controls not only the regulator, but also the judicial system to which the plaintiff would appeal to get relief from China's unlimited eminent domain. And so I think we can reform our regulatory system without fetishizing authoritarianism.
Thank you very much. Dictatorships are very efficient. Mr. Miller, you know, the challenge with data centers is that we have an electricity shortage. We already have an electricity shortage, and that's sort of at the bottom of this ramp. So I appreciate the bipartisan nature of this conversation. I don't want to get into an argument about energy policy, and I agree with Senator Cornyn. We need to move forward on permitting reform. But I'd just like to ask you if you agree with this basic point, which is the only stuff we can get on the grid quick enough to meet our immediate need in terms of data centers is, with some exceptions, but it's likely going to be solar energy. Gas is going to take a while. Gas turbines, we all know there's a backlog. Geothermal is, I think, got tremendous potential, but we're probably talking 2032 or later. Nuclear, likewise. Lots of really interesting technologies in the 2030s that could be different. But if you're talking about getting electrons on the grid right now, it's going to be solar. Am I getting that wrong, Mr. Miller?
Well, Senator, I would say I'm far from an expert in the specifics of the grid, but I hear a lot about both solar and gas powering data centers.
Anybody else on the energy piece?
Yes, I'll just say the fastest source of additional energy to the grid is to not subtract from the grid. And there's a lot of coal power plants that were slated to be shut down that are not going to be shut down because of the additional demand. But we've already squeezed all the juice out of that lump of coal. At that point, we then get to, what is the speed of new construction and adding to the grid? And you're absolutely right. Whether you love renewables or hate renewables, hard-nosed, fiscally minded companies have identified that the fastest new capacity to add is solar plus storage, I would say, solar plus storage being key. And gas turbines could be fast, but there is the backlog, as you mentioned. They're completely sold out for the next few years, and they're going to build a new factory to build more turbines, but that'll take even more years. And when you are taking out a $100 billion loan to build, an unfathomably large data center, what you really care about is speed. How fast are you going to be able to actually earn money on that investment? And that's where, speed to power and solar come into play.
Thank you.
All right, well, thank you very much, Senator Schatz. We're going to, if our panelists will stick around, we're going to go ahead and do another round of questions, and I know that maybe some of our senators will come back. So, Mr. Allen, you touched upon this already, but I want to dig into it a little bit more. The U.S. and a few key allies like the Netherlands and Japan together control the production of semiconductor manufacturing equipment, SMEs that we were talking about before. The Dutch company ASML is the sole producer of the extreme ultraviolet EUV lithography machines that are needed to make the most advanced chips. Currently, the U.S. and our allies apply some countrywide export controls on SMEs to communist China, but only on the most cutting-edge technologies like EUVs. This has succeeded in denying Beijing the capability of producing chips at the 5 nanometer level or below. However, ASML's less advanced but still highly capable deep ultraviolet DUV lithography machines are still being sold. Communist China is stockpiling these DUVs, which form the backbone of Beijing's efforts to produce cutting-edge as well as legacy chips. Mr. Chabra, what steps should the U.S. take in coordination with Japan and the Netherlands to prevent Communist China from continuing to acquire the equipment it needs to be fully independent, be a fully independent semiconductor manufacturer?
Sir, I think we could take action to ensure that more tools are withheld countrywide from China.
Does that include the DUVs?
That does, Senator. We could take action to ensure that all advanced fabs are restricted in China. We could ensure that subsidiaries of various companies that have no constraints today are upheld. And then there's just simply the routine maintenance that's required for export controls. That means playing the cat and mouse game that's inevitable every year, and so you have to allow regular updates to happen as well. But I think more countrywide updates, also not being shy about using the foreign direct product rule as well is absolutely critical.
Thank you. Dr. Miller, you talked about this as well. Data centers are the key strategic infrastructure underlying the AI revolution. Every AI model, algorithm, and national security application depends on compute running in the data centers. The expanded construction of data centers in the United States and globally is key to promoting diffusion of the full American tech stack. At the same time, Chinese entities have used AWS and Microsoft Azure to access the advanced computing power needed for training AI models. This makes sense compared to our extensive controls on advanced AI chips. We have so far taken much less focused approach to remote cloud access for AI via the U.S. data centers, so a way that they can do it. Instead, cloud companies have implemented some safeguards like know your customer standards on their own. Some experts have argued the remote cloud access is the preferable alternative to selling to Communist China. It would theoretically provide us leverage to turn off the valve, so to speak, if we ever needed to. However, this leverage becomes more complicated concerning remote access to data centers overseas, particularly in countries with friendly relationships with Communist China. Mr. Allen, what are the risks of allowing Chinese entities to have remote access to advanced computing power via American data centers? How can you control the risk of chip diversion and end up, with unauthorized users? And do you buy the argument that allowing Chinese entities remote access gives leverage to cut them off when we may need to cut them off or so desired?
I think giving remote access to Chinese companies is directly against America's interests of winning the AI diffusion race, which is to say, if we want the world to be running on American AI models, then why are we giving China the computing power they need to train models that are almost or as good or better? So if we are thinking about all the market that is going to exist and grow over the next 5 years and 10 years, this is a critical window of opportunity to leverage our compute advantage to build incredible businesses, to build customer relationships. And all that we are doing by renting this capacity to Chinese companies is building them a bridge to a future that they have stated absolutely will not include us.
Great. So, Mr. Chabra, your thoughts?
So I would just add to Mr. Allen's statement here, we believe the same thing about allowing Chinese companies to access the most advanced U.S. models. And the reason is that we see companies headquartered in China or other adversary countries using the models to build their own platforms, then taking those platforms global to win market share against U.S. companies. And in the end, as Greg said, they will drop American companies from that. And so we should not help them build that market share. And second, we don't want our AI to be supporting the development of AI applications that will end up supporting the PLA or the Chinese intelligence services.
Dr. Melvin, can you comment on that last part about if we allow Chinese companies access to remote data centers, will that get used in the Chinese military?
Well, the thing is that because we know that both Chinese models and U.S. models are currently being integrated into the Chinese military, and we know that those Chinese models have accessed U.S. cloud compute for remote, that means that by definition that remote access has in fact furthered the interest of Chinese military modernization. I would also point out that we have a significant problem on the cyber espionage side from about a decade ago when the Chinese intelligence services decided to move all the command and control infrastructure for their cyber espionage into U.S. cloud to further complicate our ability to do attribution at scale. And so again, that's another element of how that remote access, which frankly is very easy to find on the Chinese internet and on Chinese WeChat, offers to join Microsoft Azure and other things to be able to get that backdoor access. All of those are fundamentally deleterious to U.S. national interest.
Great. Thank you very much. Chair Coons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Schaber, if I might you've described the competition between China and the United States as having three parts, one of which is the race for frontier AI. Could you explain exactly what you mean and why it's so critical to be the first mover to achieve frontier AI? And can you explain recursive self-improvement and its relevance?
Thanks, Senator. So, Senator, I think the first element of this is just raw capability. We want more powerful models than China. We talked about the cyber case. We want better models for cyber defense, for cyber offense. We want better models to power scientific research. We have always relied on our innovation to power higher economic growth and to power more powerful military systems. So staying on the frontier is about raw capability. With respect to recursion, what that refers to is that frontier labs are increasingly using our AI to improve our AI systems. This is not speculative. We see that today. Anthropic today is now hiring engineers who are in some sense more managers than they would have been a few years ago because they are managers of AI agents. And so this is already a reality, and we expect to see even more of that. And what that could mean, and the timelines I want to say are not clear. It could take a bit longer, but in the next year or two, we could see efforts to really kind of close the loop where the AI can recursively self-improve itself with less and less human intervention. And what that could mean is a lead that begins with 6 months could really be extended rather rapidly. And so it's absolutely essential that we stay at the frontier for that reason.
Mr. Allen.
Senator, if I may, I'm sure you're all familiar with Moore's Law, the documented phenomenon whereby computer chips become roughly twice as powerful per unit of cost input every 2 years. This is a documented phenomenon going back to the 1960s, and it has led to literally a trillion-fold improvement in the power of computer chips per the amount of money that you put into them. But that occurred over 5 decades. If you look at progress in AI right now, there are 4 simultaneous phenomena that all exhibit Moore's Law-like characteristics. That is, the amount of training data that is used to train these models is doubling every number of years. The amount of computing power at the largest computing facilities has gone from 1,000 chips to 1 million chips, has a path to 10 million chips. The performance per chip is going up, and just the efficiency of the algorithms in utilizing computing resources. And so what that means is that progress in AI might not look like Moore's Law. It might not look like 2, 4, 8, 16, 32. It might look more like 10, 100, 1,000, 10,000. And so we might be very far away from transformative AI capabilities in terms of performance. Perhaps you've used ChatGPT or some other system and said, this is impressive, but is this really earth-shattering? But the point is, even if we are far away in terms of performance from something that might be earth-shattering, we might not be that far away in terms of years. And that is because we have these multiple simultaneous exponential growth phenomenon, so that AI 5 years from now might not be 5 times better, it might be 5,000 or 5 million times better. And that is a capability that America needs to have first.
Thank you. Dr. Mulvannon, if I might, just 2 questions. What more can and should we be doing to promote adoption, and in particular, adoption within the U.S. military and intelligence communities to match what you were describing in terms of the CCP and PLA adoption strategies? And as we sign deals, or the Trump administration has signed deals with Saudi Arabia and other countries in the Gulf, could you just talk us through briefly what kinds of guardrails and security measures we ought to have in place?
Well, in my answers earlier to Senator Schatz's question about values, I will admit I'm a little troubled by our embrace of the Stargate project in the Middle East, given the unsavory reputation of some of the regimes that are involved there. No one is doubting that they have the financial resources in order to fund this large-scale development, but I see no evidence from their political systems that they embrace the same value structure that we do, and to what extent is that going to be coded into the systems they're developing? And I would remind you of the development among these countries of things like companies like Dark Matter and other ones that ended up being ruinous sort of human rights violators in terms of developing spyware models and other things used to hack dissidents and other people within their system. So it's a cautionary tale in my view. But on the other side, in terms of the Chinese military, the Chinese military has so thoroughly embraced this idea. But I will say, and I'll go against my Irish heritage here, there's actually some good news here in the sense that we're detecting a really significant clash between the Chinese military's command culture and these technologies that are not meshing well at all, that don't match up with the sort of control-freaky ways in which the Chinese military's political control system is structured. And so there are ways of exploiting those seams in China's military implementation of AI by taking advantage of those pathologies of their military command culture and seeing them as real roadblocks to them fully implementing the technology. But at a fundamental level, there is a fundamental difference between our two military cultures. In the Chinese military, for instance, if you cut a system like this off from the brain, it results in paralysis. Whereas in our military culture, if you get cut off from a higher echelon, you're like, woohoo, right? Because now you're going to take commander's intent and you're going to take the full acme of military skill and training and you're going to go John Wayne some stuff, right? And, so it's just a fundamental difference between our two militaries.
Thank you. Thank you all for your testimony.
Senator Van Hollen.
Thank you, Senator, and thank all of you for your testimony. Been watching you on C-SPAN. I think there are two pieces to our strategy, and you've been covering those. One is to make sure we make the necessary investments here at home to stay at the cutting edge of chips technology and AI. And obviously those are linked. The other is to use export controls to try to maintain our edge and deny China, for example, access to at least our highest end chips and also the equipment that you can use to develop the highest end chips. In that regard, Mr. Allen, I know you spoke favorably about a rule that the Trump administration issued earlier this year, the affiliates rule, which seems to make common sense, right? Which is if we have an entities list and we decide that companies on that list should not receive the highest end U.S. technologies, that we should close the loophole that would allow them to create a subsidiary or another corporate form and do an end run. That was a good rule, was it not?
Yes, it absolutely was. And in my own analysis of this topic, I'll just tell you, at one point in my work in the DoD, I was asked to review an entity listing. And I found that there was a Chinese company that had been entity listed, and then we'd found a shell company subsidiary. And apparently, this was 6 years after we had entity listed the first company, and we found that the shell company had been operating for at least 5 of those 6 years. And the point is that the Chinese ability to play legal whack-a-mole here is they can create new companies in weeks. Our very rule of law oriented, which has its advantages, approach does not take weeks to detect all of this stuff. And so what you need are rules that are simple and broad. The export controls that we have that are working the best are the countrywide export controls. Those are the ones where we've gotten by far the most bang for buck. And other kinds of rules, like the affiliates rules, I think are a prerequisite for the entity list to have any kind of enduring relevance in the future.
Now, I appreciate that, and the BIS over at the Department of Commerce described this as a, quote, vital tool for national security when it was issued. And I have to say that many of us were surprised and disappointed when President Trump abandoned, or at least suspended for a year, this rule when he met with President Xi in South Korea. Do you share that concern and disappointment?
Yes, I do not think national security should be something horse-traded in any kind of negotiation. I think export controls can have two purposes. They can be made to look tough, or they can be made to be tough. And I think there's really no point in doing anything other than trying to be tough. And these are table stakes for being tough and effective in the modern era.
I appreciate that. And, you know, the head of NVIDIA flew out there, and I don't know if Senator Schatz raised it, but, you know, we've got to be willing to stand up for our national security interests and not trade them off against some of these other interests. Speaking of that, I do want to get to the AI diffusion rule, because I saw a podcast you did back in the day when the Biden administration issued the diffusion rule, which, as you know, set up different categories of countries based on our concern or the risk that our technology, high-end AI and chips technology, would fall into other hands, specifically hands of our adversaries and specifically China. And the UAE, for example, was put not in one of those categories that we had to be guarded, that we had to put up some restrictions and monitoring systems. And I saw you speaking, I think, favorably about that rule. That rule is no longer in place with respect to the UAE, is it?
No, it is not, Senator.
I mean, the Trump administration abandoned the diffusion rule, and you're aware that it was just shortly before President Trump visited the UAE that the Trump administration scrapped that rule. Is that right?
That is correct.
Yeah. And it also scrapped that rule shortly after Eric Trump had preceded the president to visiting the UAE and did a deal with a company called MGX, whereby MGX invested in the Trump family crypto enterprise. And then, very shortly thereafter, President Trump shows up, abandons the diffusion rule, and decides to provide important U.S. technology to G42, another UAE-owned entity. The chair of both entities is the same person, is it not, Mr. Allen?
To the best of my knowledge, yes.
Right. And he's a member of the royal family there. And I do think as a committee we should be concerned. The House, on a bipartisan basis, when the Biden administration was in office, expressed lots of concern about abandoning the diffusion rule. And yet the diffusion rule was just abandoned by the Trump administration. So I have to say, both the chairman and the ranking member, this is something that worries me greatly because, as we said, we need a two-pronged strategy. Invest here at home, but also have and as you said, how important it is, Mr. Allen, a vigorous and well-enforced regime to prevent high-end technology from falling into the hands of our adversaries. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Shaheen?
Well, thank you, and I apologize to all of our witnesses for missing most of the testimony. I had another meeting, unfortunately. But I do want to ask you about something. This morning, the Council on Foreign Relations had an event with former Secretary Raimondo and someone who served in the Trump Treasury Department, Justin Mucinich. And I asked them this question, and I want to hear the answer of this panel to it. News reports have suggested that giving the Blackwell chips to China isn't just about giving them that technology, but allows them to build out the industry in ways that they would not be able to do without having access to those chips. Do you share that view? And if you do, what should we be doing to respond to that? I don't know who wants to answer that.
Perhaps I'll begin, if that's all right. The Blackwell chip does what Chinese chips can't. You have probably heard that Huawei and Cambricon and other Chinese companies have designed AI chips, and they are manufacturing them at times with Chinese manufacturing partners. The reality of the situation is we are focused on the count of those chips. We should also focus on the quality. Those chips are lousy. They have much higher failure rates than NVIDIA chips. They are much worse at working as a team. You know, when you have 200,000 chips at a data center, from the perspective of the programmer, if it's an NVIDIA stack, they can interact with that like it's one chip. If it's Huawei, doing so is a nightmare. Now, Huawei is full of smart, hardworking people. They will continue to make progress. But what I want to emphasize is that what China needs right now is a bridge to the future. and selling them Blackwells would be the bridge to that future. And China's government is absolutely committed that that future includes eliminating all reliance on American technology. So the question is, do we want to make that as easy for them as possible, or do we want to make that as expensive and complicated as possible? If we arm China's AI industry with hundreds of thousands or millions of Blackwells, they will turn that firepower on the American technology industry all over the world, and they will also literally arm their armed forces with the computing capabilities that those types of systems deliver.
Does everyone else on the panel agree with that? Are there any dissenting views?
Well, Senator, I would only point out also, and Jensen Huang has even said this, that he feels like people focus too much on their chips, but it is the software and the CUDA systems that come with the chips that actually are maybe the secret sauce behind the secret sauce that allow those chips, as Greg said, to be able to work together so seamlessly. And that is really the combination of all of that comes with the Blackwell system, and therefore comes with those Blackwell chips, and therefore might then help them make more progress in their own systems, building out the software and things necessary to complement their own chip development.
So why are we considering that? What's the benefit to the U.S. to do that?
If I may, the hypothesis for how is it a benefit to that is that we are taking dollars out of Huawei's pocket and putting it into NVIDIA's pocket. So the idea then is that we are putting that revenue stream towards American companies. But what I want to say is that this is true for other types of countries. The reason why NVIDIA is dominant in Europe, America, South America, it's just different competitive dynamics in China because the Chinese government is willing to do whatever it takes to prop up local companies. If you look at other industries that have not had export controls, such as EVs, firms like Tesla have built the Chinese supply chain that is now fueling the companies that are outcompeting Tesla in China. We are stopping that from being the case in China with these export controls. And China's government already had a policy in 2020 called the 352 plan that was going to force all government ministries and all state-owned enterprises to buy locally made AI chips. In this case, Huawei chips manufactured at TSMC. So right now in 2025, why does Huawei not have 100% market share in China? It's because we had export controls that blocked Huawei from manufacturing those AI chips at China, which the Chinese government was absolutely prepared to force Chinese companies to buy. So the reason why NVIDIA enjoyed the AI boom in China all of this time is because they were protected by export controls. That's not why they win in Europe, that's not why they win in America, but that to the extent they've won in China, that's why.
Thank you.
All right, I think we're going to do one more round of questions. All right, great. So the United States and Communist China appear to be pursuing different goals in the AI race. American AI companies are spending enormous capital to develop artificial general intelligence. AGI is self-improving AI which surpasses the cognitive power of human beings and is capable of executing real-world tasks. AGI is has been argued that AGI will lead to explosive economic growth and scientific discovery. Beijing, perhaps out of necessity due to limitations with computing power, has instead focused on rapid diffusion and integration of AI across the whole of its industrial sector. For instance, Communist China operates more than 2 million robots powered or augmented by small-scale AI applications. Notably, these applications don't require the immense training, compute, or inference infrastructure of Western chatbots. I'm actually going to ask all of you to comment on this. We'll start with you, Dr. Miller. Is AGI the correct outcome to pursue in terms of our strategic competition with Communist China? And then when we're thinking about this, are there milestones we should be looking at to determine whether or not who's ahead in this AI race, assuming that we're going after completely different goals?
Senator, I believe we both want to build very capable AI systems, like the phrase AGI references, and also want to deploy AI as broadly as possible across our economy in every segment, not just in the technology sector. I think in China, there's been a challenge when it comes to training the most advanced AI systems because of this compute gap. Chinese firms can train quite good models, but there still is a gap that remains that they've struggled to close because of their lack of access to computing power. I'll call your attention to a paper and a new model that DeepSeek released just this week, an update on the model they trained earlier this year that attracted so much attention. And in that paper, they called attention to the ways they had to tweak their model to take account of the fact that they didn't have all the chips they needed. This speaks to the challenge of training truly frontier models without access to advanced compute, a challenge that will grow over time as America's compute advantage compounds. And I think this is one of the reasons why China is focusing more on applications, because they have to, where our companies can pursue more generally capable AI systems.
Okay. And is there a way, if they have to, I mean, is the gist then just continue to do what we're doing so we continue to have that gap, and then they're forced to do the applications because they don't have a choice? Is that fair?
I think that's right, Senator, and I think our companies are also doing the applications. Yeah. Applications are certainly not a bad thing, but it's good to have both the super capable systems and the applications.
Right. Mr. Allen?
I would certainly echo that American companies are absolutely going to pursue applications because that's where so much of the economic value and opportunity is going to come from. You mentioned, Senator, physical AI as a dimension, and I absolutely agree that this is an area that the Chinese government has identified that they might have an advantage simply because of their overwhelming manufacturing capacity in associated electronics industries. But I would say that advanced AI capabilities here still matter. If you think back to my point earlier about autonomous vehicles, where now large language model-like capabilities are being integrated into the autonomous driving stacks of these systems. Humanoid robotics are going to be endowed with large language models if they're going to interact with human users in any kind of industrial or consumer-facing setting. And all of these things, there's an opportunity to make China's life easy and to make China's life hard. It is no excuse for not trying to run faster ourselves, but we should not be giving Gatorade and fancy Nike shoes to China while we're in this race.
Okay, great. Mr. Chabra.
Thanks, Senator. I think you put your finger on it when you said out of necessity. So I have every confidence that China would be pursuing the AI frontier right with us if they had access to the computing power that they want, but they don't today. And we as a company see efforts by Chinese companies to do what's called distillation, is to try to really extract sensitive IP from our models to try to catch up, given the lack of compute that they have. So there is every bit the same interest in achieving the frontier. Now, I very much agree with this, the challenge of physical AI, which is we need to make sure we're preparing our manufacturing base, and particularly our defense industrial base, to take advantage of very powerful AI capabilities as they come online, because otherwise China will be able to rely on what is currently a much larger defensive. And I think that's actually very crucial to maintain deterrence in the future.
Dr. Mullen.
I would only pose the following question, which is, do we want to be first to AGI? Again, given the embedded values and everything else that we've been talking about, I think it's absolutely imperative, for the same reason it was imperative for us to detonate the first atomic bomb to win World War II. Because the stakes, in my view, and I admit I'm a bit of a doomer, but the stakes are very, very high on this front. One thing I would bring to your attention, though, is that one of the key differences also between China and the United States in terms of its implementation of AI has been their deliberate decision to pursue open source models, which they believe is going to allow them to encircle the United States and spread the Chinese tech stack around the world, and thus create a network effect with artificial intelligence, as opposed to the closed garden models of US companies. And so I think we still haven't really seen all of that play out yet, but I think that's a really important dynamic that the Chinese government has built into their strategy.
Well, one of the privileges of being chair is that you get to go over your time when you want. So on that point, though, so you talk about this idea of open AI and that the Chinese are pursuing this. There's a reason why U.S. companies are pursuing the closed models, because that's where the profit is, right? That they can protect their intellectual property. What steps could we do either as a government or as a private sector in the United States, given the free enterprise system we have, to be able to counter or mitigate what Communist China is trying to do with regard to an approach of using open AI?
Well, I would bring us back to one of the bingo words from the Biden administration, which was plurilateral, which was the idea that we were hanging out with like-minded democratic countries. And the extent to which that alignment, to quote Senator Schatz, that even though they're the closed models, these are the most powerful countries in the world, are like-minded democratic allies in South Korea and Japan and Taiwan, as well as in Europe. And to the extent to which, and this is already happening with Anthropic and others, to the extent to which that US tech stack becomes the democratic AI tech stack, and that the dangers of an understanding of the hidden faults in the DeepSeek models, there's been a lot of really interesting research done recently about how the DeepSeek models have embedded in them the ability to actually not only censor content, but in fact change outcomes based on a preset of weights that have more to do with the authoritarian dystopian view of the Chinese Communist Party than it does general world knowledge. And so again, I think there's an interest, as Tarun said, of working with like-minded allies to say that there's going to be a Western tech stack on artificial general intelligence.
Well, what about startup companies that can't afford to pay for the private models and start using Chinese models because they're open and free?
Yes.
Now, here in our country, in Silicon Valley.
It's a very.
What do you do about that?
It's a very significant problem. There is definitely a high barrier to entry right now in terms of those closed models.
So I'm saying, I tell you, you don't have a good answer for me right off the top of your head.
I'm a Chinese.
I'm
a Chinese linguist. I recognize my limitations. You know?
Senator Coons.
Senator, if I may respond to your last question, I think the ideal state of affairs where we want to get back to is 2023. Where America had the best closed models and America had the best open models. Now, I happen to be of the opinion that the economics of open source AI are going to break down at the absolute frontier. It's really tough to tell your investors you're going to spend $300 billion on a data center to create a model that you're then going to give away for free, right? That's a tough row to hoe.
But you'll sell advertising.
Yeah, certainly. And so my point is, I think that the closed models will continue to have a performance advantage, but that there will still be a demand sector for open models, and America should try and lead in both. China only has a credible path, at least right now, to leading in one, and we could be leading if we had made better decisions in terms of the architectures we pursued and the timelines we pursued them. So I do think getting back to the 2023 state of affairs is within our reach, and I think export controls are an important part of that story.
Great, thank you. Senator Coons.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a quick follow-up, Mr. Schaber, if I might, on the exchange I had and the chairman had with Dr. Movanen earlier. Anthropic's one of the companies that works with our defense industrial base, with our national security enterprise, more broadly, I should put it. How could we and should we be pushing for faster and broader adoption of AI within our national security community? And the previous question I asked about, as the administration is signing deals with the UAE and the Saudis, what sorts of guardrails and security measures should we have in place?
So, Senator, with respect to adoption, we think there's room for procurement reform. In many cases, as you know, our procurement processes are made for weapon systems that take 5 to 10 years to develop, not AI models that are improving in a matter of months. We need to be able to prototype, move very quickly, build in a modular way. Sometimes the budget owners and those chiefly responsible for deploying are not the same. We need better alignment there so that the users have much more say over how they're spending. We need to make sure that the national security community has access to more computing power. We talked about cyber attacks earlier. We need to be able to scale cyber defense. We need to be able to scale offense as well. We're going to need to have much more access to more compute, particularly for classified systems as well. And then just to give some grace to our colleagues in the government, this is very hard. This is happening across the business world right now. You have to re-engineer how you do business. It's not just a matter of adopting the model. And so there's a lot more there that we could help them do. With respect to your question on data center security, there are a number of elements here that are all going to be important, particularly in jurisdictions where there are legacy relationships with the Chinese military or Chinese intelligence services. The first is just basic physical security, hardening your perimeters, supply chain security, personnel access. Second is cybersecurity. We know these data centers are going to be targets for Chinese and Russian attackers and others. The third is protecting the crown jewels, which are the model weights themselves, which are going to be huge targets, of course. Then we need end-use monitoring to make sure there isn't remote access from actors like China or Russia as well. And then we need off-ramps. We need to be very clear that if there is non-compliance, there's a way to get out of the deal.
Thank you to all 4 of our witnesses. You did a tremendous job today, and I really appreciated it.
Just a final question. One of the things that I have been concerned about has been this administration's withdrawing from international bodies and leaving China to make policy in those international bodies. So as you're looking at global AI governance, where should we be focused to ensure that that governance, those regulations are not being set by China, but that we're at the table?
So, Senator, I would begin to answer your question by pointing out that I think one of the most effective and quiet things that China has done over the last 20 years to change the nature of the world technology order was to engage in what I called standards warfare, which was to recognize that going to these very boring, sometimes technical meetings with large numbers of officials and official, coordinated policy papers and engineers, that they were able, frankly, to rickroll us in a lot of these fora. And that had fundamental downstream changes for architectures. A perfect example of sort of the unintended consequences of that was the 5G patents out of 3GPP, right? Because on the one hand, we could say, well, we're banning Huawei from selling phones into individual markets. But Huawei owned 40% of the royalties in the 5G standard. So even in situations in which they weren't the ones selling the phones, they were still making VIG on the sale of the phone because of the downstream standard licensing fees. And so understanding that that's really kind of the inside nerd game on all of this. And they have been extremely aggressive on AI governance all around the world. And there are certain key fora, whether it is the WIPO or whether it's the International Telecommunications Union or other places, we really need to step up our game and understand that sending some bearded engineer and his Birkenstocks to the meeting is not going to be effective if the Chinese show up with their usual delegation that is fully prepared to enact China's national strategy at our expense.
So if you were going to say we need to refocus on these 3 international bodies, what would they be? Anybody?
Gentlemen. Well, the interesting thing is there is no overarching AI governance body right now. And so you're asking international organizations to sort of retool themselves,
right,
like the Chinese did when they tried to make ITU oversee the internet, which the ITU was singularly sort of ill-equipped to do. Again, I come back to I've become increasingly disenchanted with multilateral regimes only because they water everything down to the lowest common denominator. And I would highlight that while, and I'll give Tarun and his people the credit for this, the trade and technology councils that we followed under our plurilateral discussions with the Europeans, I think was a model for how we could develop our own Western like-minded set of standards and strategy, break down antitrust barriers between companies so that we can actually develop a competing end-to-end stack on key technologies.
Okay, so where should we be doing that, and who should be responsible for it? Mr. Chopra?
Senator, as Dr. Malvenin said, there isn't a fit-for-purpose institution today, but there's plenty of room for American leadership to assemble like-minded countries to do this. I think there's an enormous hunger from our allies around the world to do this.
And who should be doing it?
I think it should be led by the United States.
But who within the United States? Should it be within our government? Should it be in the private sector? Should it be the U.S. Chamber? Who should be doing it?
I think it needs to be a combination of the White House and the State Department with the participation of our leading AI companies.
And do you see any evidence that that's happening?
So I think the closest thing we have right now are the AI summits that are happening. There's one coming up in India, and that's an opportunity for us to build the kind of trusted AI framework that I mentioned earlier.
Anybody else want to add to that?
Yes, I'll say that during the last administration, we saw some really interesting international engagements begin diplomatically at the G7, aligning on AI governance standards. I think that prevented the EU AI Act, for example, from going in a far worse direction than it ultimately did. A lot of that work stream has now moved to the OECD, where I think our disengagement on these work streams sort of comes at our peril, because many foreign regulations point to international standards. The Vienna and Frankfurt treaties in the EU direct them to use international standards whenever possible. And so if we're absent from those conversations in the OECD or the ISO, it may still come up in our companies and what they engage as they go around the world. You asked who should be leading this. I would just add the Department of Commerce and NIST, of course, has a critical role in all of this. And the Center for AI Standards and Innovation, as the successor to the organization AC, also created an international AI safety network. I think that was actually pretty well received by the allies and partners who participated in it, and offered us an opportunity to show leadership just by doing great work. You know, when you talk about the standards, I think the fact that 700 million people around the world are using ChatGPT, that's sort of a de facto outcome around which all standards conversations must take place. And similarly, even in areas like the NIST AI risk management framework, that was a fundamentally American document, but the fact that we had such an open and inclusive process, and the fact that we produced such a good outcome, gave it extraordinary influence in international conversations. And so I would look to those venues like the OECD, like the CASE. Can we produce great products, great ideas around AI governance standards? And then can we distribute that outward and bring that to the broader world? And I think White House OSTP and Department of Commerce are well situated to do that kind of work.
I agree they're well situated. Do you think they're doing it?
I'm not in a position to comment on the extent to which they're doing it adequately, simply because I have not investigated that, but they are certainly doing it.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Shaheen, and thank you to all of our witnesses today. Very much appreciate it. I might be a little bit biased, but this has probably been one of the best hearings I've been at with regard to the testimony you provided and giving us guidance on where we should be going with regard to our AI strategy here. So thank you very much, and I want to thank Senator Coons' team and then my team. Great job on putting together the hearing today. I really think you all did a great job. As we all know, this place runs because we have great staff. So thank you to the staff who put this together. For the information of members, the record will remain open until the close of business tomorrow, December 3rd. We ask the witnesses to respond promptly as possible. Your response will also be made part of the record. And again, with thanks to the committee, this hearing is adjourned.